Hi there, all you beautiful people. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach and author of the beautiful little book, A Life to Die For. I'm also one of the co-authors in the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. This is episode number 209, Full of Yourself. You ever had someone tell you that you were just too full of yourself? It certainly happened to me on a few occasions, particularly when I was a kid. I remember hearing something like that from my mom, and her tone made it pretty clear in my mind that this was not a good thing. Years later, however, I had a recollection of this message, and the question that came up for me was, well, who else would I be full of? Many people hold back from expressing their natural, exuberant self because they're afraid of being perceived as being too much or taking up too much space. This fear is often tied to an old story or belief that says, if I act and speak freely and confidently about what I love and how I show up, well, people won't like me and they'll leave me. I will be all alone. So, how do we typically cope with this? Well, in order to avoid that rejection and any judgment that might be associated with it, a common response is to hold back the true self. Instead of showing up fully and authentically, we tend to hide in the background. We become those wallflowers, you know what I mean? And left unaddressed, this pattern can get in the way of growth, joy, and a natural fulfillment of the desire to be seen and heard in life. I mean, we all want to be seen. We all want to be experienced. We all want to be recognized. And in truth, there's really nothing wrong with being full of yourself. So I've decided to turn this idea on its head. And for today's episode, I have invited back a transformational coach, speaker, and visibility sage, the beautiful and delightful Gayle Nowak, for a compassionate and fresh conversation on being whole and full within. So please join me in welcoming Gayle back to the program today. Hey there, Gayle. Good to see you again. Oh, she's on voice.
I'm here. I'm just my webcam is just taking a moment to warm up. There we go.
Well, there you go. So yeah, I'm so glad you could come back and join me again on relatively short notice. It's great that we're doing this again.
Yeah, no, I'm honored to be back so soon, and what a fun conversation to be having today.
Yeah, and you know what? I remember. See, I went and I sat in on your show, Unmask Your Magic. Is that the correct title? I think that's right.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
I
is.
don't have my notes in front of me right at the moment. Unmask Your Magic, and it turned out that you and I were the only ones there, and it was really awesome. And we had a great conversation. And this particular idea popped up during that conversation, and that's why I decided I'm going to grab onto this because this is going to be a great topic to discuss. So anyway, I want to thank you for inspiring this topic and for helping me to write it up.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's definitely a topic. We were just talking before the show. It's definitely something that I see in my work with clients. It's certainly something that I've experienced a little bit different, I think, maybe from you. And we can kind of go into the details of how this is actually two ends of the same spectrum. And I feel like maybe your experiences that you shared from childhood were on one end of that spectrum, and mine were kind of on the other end of that spectrum. But as I was listening to you, I actually was reminded that my family, my caregivers, when I was really little, it jogged a memory that they used to call me a chatterbox.
Ah.
Right. And it was probably a harmless thing. I probably was. You talk about, your own exuberance, and
Right.
when you're a little child, right? Like you're excited and curious about life, and you talk, and you're learning language, and it just sparked that memory of, oh yeah, they used to call me a chatterbox. And then within a couple of years, I was hearing how shy I was. So
Isn't
isn't it
that
funny
interesting?
how we as children get these messages and we don't always understand the intent or the meaning, or that it's just maybe something that they're saying off the cuff, or maybe mom's just a little tired and needs a little peace.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. I think what I have observed, I mean, I've had 3 kids of my own, so I have seen this up close and firsthand. Kids tend to be very literal.
Yeah.
And, everything that you say, I mean, I could make a joke that an adult would laugh at, but I say it to my kid, and my kid says, huh? I don't quite get it, you know, because I'm trying to make a play on words or something like that. Well, young
Right.
kids just don't understand that. And we adults tend to forget that children don't have that ability to abstract things well enough to be able to understand a joke or something. But the other thing that happens is, the word chatterbox for a young child probably has no meaning whatsoever. But the tone behind it is probably what you experienced. Because whoever said that may have been a little irritated by the fact that you were talking a lot, and or maybe just trying to express yourself or whatever it was. And because of that irritation or whatever was going on, that kind of came through in the message. Trying to be, nice and playful and loving and stuff, and not necessarily, and not deliberately trying to hurt you, but creating that energy that you felt in your body. And so you probably, cocked your head a little or something and said, huh? I wonder what that's all about. And like you said, then you start making up stories in your head.
Yeah.
Maybe mom's just tired and needs a break. But what happens is, and you've described this, I think, really, really well, is sometimes we can internalize these messages in a way that we make it about ourselves, like there's something wrong with me. This
Yeah.
is the beginning, really, in my mind. I don't know if this is, some psychologists will tell me I'm dead wrong about this, but I believe this is the start of toxic shame. I think this is where it begins. All it takes is one innocent little message like that, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to shift. I'm starting to change. I'm starting to become something other than, or I'm what's the word I'm trying to look for here? I'm maybe putting on some kind of a costume or something to show up the way I think you want me to be.
Right.
So
Yeah, and I think you're right on the money. I think in general, children are very sensitive, right? It's kind of how we're wired, right? It's part of our survival to attach to our caregivers. Um, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but my sense of it is that it's tuning in to the energies, to the people who are taking care of us, to the energies around us is innate. And so what you
right,
said about like it, chatterbox, what does that mean to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old? Doesn't mean anything, right? But like you said, the tone, maybe the body language, the energy around it, certainly a child is going to be able to pick up on that, right? And without the the context or the proper tools or the proper message of uh, an adult who has all of these, ideally has all of these capacities, right? Um, to say, mom's feeling tired. I really love hearing you talk about what you're excited about. And this is what I need, right? Like to have those conversations. It's not always easy to do that as a parent either, right? I'm a parent of 2 teenage kids. So I get this too, right? Like sometimes you're just speaking off the cuff. You don't mean to be hurtful or whatever, and you just kind of get caught up in the moment. Right. But there's always opportunity to repair. But when you're in an environment, right, exactly. But when you're in an environment where maybe the adults around you don't have these tools, they don't have the maturity, they don't have the support, and then you get into this pattern of being a child who internalizes, I did something wrong, or this is a bad quality that I have, or maybe not, maybe those aren't the kid words, or like, I did something wrong, I did something bad. This
Right.
is a bad thing. And then that sets you up for taking on that one experience, internalizing it, and now you're operating from this false belief, right?
Correct. Yep. And it's just the starting point. And in fact, it probably started even before that. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
the thing that we don't think about. I mean, here's an innocent parent comment for a toddler. You're changing the diaper. You know, I just changed your diaper 5 minutes ago. Now, that kid probably has no idea what the words mean. Or maybe he or she does. But the point is, the energy coming through is, I'm frustrated and I'm angry because I'm changing your diaper again, and it's your fault. That's the energy that's being expressed to the child. And we do this. All of us experience it. We're on the receiving end of it from our own parents from the moment we're born. And then when we have children of our own, we say, I'm never going to be like my mom. And then I turn out and I start doing things that my mom used to do. And I say, oh my God, how am I ever going to get over this? You know? And it's just part of the human journey. But you said something I think is extremely important. You said there's always an opportunity to repair. Well, you're not going to repair anything unless you realize that you have made a mistake, or you've caused a problem, or you've hurt somebody. And parents they don't want to appear weak to their kids, right? So parents who don't have a high level of awareness may not go to the trouble of saying, little Judy, whatever your name is, whatever the kid's name is, I'm really sorry that I did that. That I can see hurt your feelings, and I really wasn't trying to do that. I was just frustrated and upset about something else that had nothing to do with you. And then you can come back and start saying the things that you were just saying a moment ago. I mean, I really love your enthusiasm, your joy, and your playfulness and all that stuff. And I'm sorry that I snapped at you.
Yeah.
Well, just apologizing. How many kids get apologies from their parents? It's pretty
Yeah.
rare. Well, maybe today it's getting better, but I
I think
remember in my time, I don't remember my parents ever apologizing to me, to be honest with you.
sure. And I think it is getting better. I do think that it's getting better. Oh, my connection is a little spotty, so hopefully you could still hear and see me. Yeah, and I feel like I have that conversation weekly with my kids. And you're absolutely right. Like, if you don't have awareness around the impact that you might be having, your energy and your emotions might be having on your child, then that opportunity to apologize or to
Correct.
repair something, right? That's going to slip by. So you bring up a great point, is like, how do you want to be? How do you want to be as an adult? How do you want to be as a parent? If you're a parent, how do you want to be as a leader? How do you want to be with your colleagues and your coworkers? It's never too late to become aware. It's never too late to make that change. It's never too late to change the story that you're telling yourself about
Right.
being full of yourself or not being enough. I mean, I know for me, that was really what I struggled with. I got that initial message of Chatterbox, but then, I think I went and did the opposite, right? And then struggled with not feeling enough or feeling good enough for a very long time. And that can be our tendency to think that, oh, well, if I'm too much, then I'll do the opposite of that. And it's actually the same energy.
Right.
and yields undesirable results either way, right?
Correct. Yep.
So you can get stuck on this path, this very well-worn path of being too much, not enough, too much, not enough, too much, not enough, when really what we want to try to do is step off the path.
Sure. Yeah. And speaking of never too late, it's never too late to apologize. I know that I went through a big chunk of my life being pretty unaware and pretty controlling in my own way with my kids. And it wasn't until they were probably in their 20s when I finally came around and started realizing some of the things I had done way back when. And anytime I would remember something that I could see could have caused a problem, I would go back to that child and say, I apologize. I realize now what I did, and I can guess what kind of impact it had on you. I was an idiot. What can I say? And I don't necessarily use those words, but you get the point. And it's amazing. My kids, they respond immediately. It doesn't matter how old they are. They love the fact that I'm willing to say, yeah, I screwed up,
Yeah.
and I screwed up big time if it's necessary. It's not that hard to do either. Once you become clear about who you really are and what kind of person you want to be, apologizing for things you've done in the past becomes easy. It's only hard when you're still stuck in that ego mind thing that says, I got to be right all the time.
Mm. Yeah. And I really appreciate what you're saying about it. It's never too late. I've experienced that as a daughter from both of my parents.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not perfect, but I will say that that's really a step in the right direction. And maybe was in my ego mind, it's long overdue. And at the same time, I'm so grateful to just know, that some of those things have been now acknowledged that were ignored for so long.
Right.
It starts that healing process. Sometimes sometimes it's an easy thing. Sometimes it's easy to sort of speak off the cuff and say something that you didn't mean and repair that. And sometimes we're talking about much bigger, deeper repairs that involve abuse, involve trauma. And for those who are involved with that and kind of responsible for that, I can appreciate, how difficult that is to look yourself in the mirror and to admit I messed up here.
Yeah.
Right. And then to also be on the other side and to be able to hear that from someone who messed up is sometimes not always easy either. And it can still, if each party is willing to get humble and can find even just the tiniest shred of compassion, it can really begin a whole healing process around that. I think it might take, depending on the situation, it may take a little bit more than just the words, right? Your actions have to align with your words too. But man, the power of just saying, you know what? I see. I hear what you're saying about the impact. I see that, it's affected you, and I love you. That wasn't my intention. I was scared. Whatever it was, like, and just being humble about that goes such a long way.
Yep.
Such a long way.
Yeah, and it can go even further if you've done enough personal growth work on yourself to know the kind of person you truly want to be in this world, and to continue to show up in that way, to be full of your authentic self, so to speak. Then coming back to someone and owning the truth, making amends. It's not about saying, sorry that happened. That's empty. That has nothing.
Right.
But when you can say to someone like, when that was going on, I remember I was going through a lot of stuff of my own at the time. It had nothing to do with you. And it was just, I was in a lot of pain. a lot of emotional pain. And I think I was lashing out at just about everybody,
Yeah.
you know? And I don't like the fact that I was doing that. I like the fact that I have learned about that I have done some some healing work to deal with all the trauma and energy and wounding that happened to me. I'm happy about that. And I'm happy that I now recognize the kinds of consequences that I created with some of my choices. I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not had you to be a mirror for me. So I'm grateful for that too. And I understand that there was some pain caused there, and I'm willing to take responsibility for all of that. If you want to do some work with me on that, I'm available to do that with you. I mean, how else can you say I love you? I mean, come on, really. That's what it's all about, right? Is expressing love through consistent, integrous actions that are in alignment with who you really are and why you believe you're here on this planet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you're bringing this up as an example of being full of yourself, right? Because it takes a level of loving yourself to even be able to be the kind of person who is in integrity, owns your responsibilities, right? Takes full responsibility for your actions, and then expresses and acts in according to that.
Right.
So I feel like this conversation is really kind of giving a different meaning to that phrase, full of yourself. We're not necessarily talking about um, the bravado and the eh, you know, I think you said blustery in the write up, right? Like we're not talking about the hot air, right?
That's right.
Necessarily. We're talking about the deep, authentic parts of ourselves, even the things that make us shake in our boots,
That's right.
right? And sometimes apologizing makes us shake in our boots because we don't know. We hope that that makes a repair. It might not, right? And so the fear of um, maybe the other person not receiving that, sometimes that stops us from making amends, or maybe there's some consequences for what we've done, and that stops us because we're afraid of the
Right.
consequences. And but when you're someone who really is um committed to being as authentic and as real and as fully expressed as you can be at whatever moment we're talking about, right? Because it's not a one and done thing. It's a journey, it's a process.
Right.
um it becomes more about walking that path and less about protecting yourself from the consequences or protecting your ego, as you know, as we've talked about a couple of times here, or being right. It's not it starts to not become about that anymore. It starts to become about, am I being a loving person in this situation?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I loving myself in this situation?
Yeah. Well, one thing I've learned, people are probably going to be upset if they hear me say this, but I think apologies are useless. I really do. I think works, what works for people, even though they might not know this, is true accountability. And accountability, and I mean self accountability. And that really is about, what choice did I make? What consequences were created as a result of that choice? Was there a part of me, a shadow part of me, that was driving this behavior that resulted in these consequences? And if so, what was that shadow? And am I willing to do the work to uncover, illuminate, heal, and integrate that shadow back into my being? And then, am I willing to make a new commitment to this person in front of me with whom I'm taking accountability? It doesn't mean, hey, I forgot to do such and such. It doesn't mean necessarily doing the thing that you forgot to do. It means dealing with your own shadow in a transparent and easy to see way for the other person. and then having that person as an ally to help you in that accountability process going forward. So you make a new agreement and you have someone who's watching you. And I'll tell you, this is the way that you can create massive trust with people. Because if you, all right, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to be perfect. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to do everything I said I was going to do in exactly the way I said I was going to do it. What it means is that I'm willing to stand up and face you when I am out of integrity. That's what it really means. How many, we talk about accountability in politics all the time, and yet there is zero accountability. Nobody ever takes accountability for their actions, unless they're forced to by going to court or something like that. It's a highly egotistical world that we live in. And it's very hard sometimes for people like you and me to kind of not shake our heads and maybe cast judgment on some of those people.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I've certainly had those moments, right? Because you and I are committed to walking that path and showing up that way. And we've seen the benefit of that. And we've also seen the cost of not showing up that way and not being that way.
Oh, yeah.
And for us, the choice, the commitment is, this is living this way, really figuring out who am I who am I, right? Who am I being my true self? And really being committed to uncovering that and working with that, looking at those shadow pieces, like you mentioned. It's a lifestyle. This is not, I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love retreats and workshops and everything. And I love to learn about all of this stuff, right? But you can read about this and learn about this and have a weekend retreat and get a taste of this. And the benefits come when it is a lifestyle, right? Like that you're choosing to live your life this way. And I love that we're having this conversation, because this is not a conversation that's in the general public. It's not a conversation that are the systems of our society, the leaders of the systems of our society are necessarily having, right? They're still doing it the old way, right?
That's right.
Politics, education, corporate America.
That's right.
Right. And so, I don't know, maybe somebody's tuning in from those realms who are listening to this, because gosh, imagine what our world would be like if more of the general population really kind of took this to heart and at least experimented with it.
See, I love the way you shape it and frame it. I tend to be a little more cut and dried about stuff. I've definitely got the warrior energy going most of the time. You have more lover energy, so you're more about connection and and bringing people together, and I think that's great. And this is one of the reasons that I think that you and I have a great way of working together. This is just my interpretation. I think we both have, the magician and the sovereign energy in plenty of abundance as well. But I tend to be very, very direct and very, let's say I can be in your face about things.
I can source that warrior too, but you're right. I tend more on the lover side.
Yeah. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. There's nothing, it's neither good nor bad. It's not like, you have to be one way or another. But I think what we all need to do ultimately is learn how to be true to who we really are. If we don't do that, if we choose not to do it, if we believe that that's not necessary, then we're probably not going to have very fulfilling lives. And I think that speaks volumes, because you can see so many people who are unhappy in this world. They're doing all the things that all the other people are telling them to do, rather than following the truth in their heart and their soul. And so consequently, they're not really fulfilled. They feel like many people, I've heard this many, many times over, they feel like they're just bouncing around from one thing to another, trying to find, the brass ring, as they say. That thing that sits there, oh, once I've got this, then I'll be happy. No, it doesn't work that way. Try being happy first. And then all of a sudden, that thing that you think you're after might not be so important, and other things might start taking a higher priority in your life. It's a choice.
Yeah, it is a choice. And we live in a world that teaches us to be fake.
That's right.
And so the choice is always there. Are we going to continue to do what we've learned, what we've been conditioned to do, what we've taken on? And so, and this isn't a judgment. I mean, this was my life until fairly recently. And I even had certain expressions that didn't look like that. I can look back and recognize, well, I probably looked like I was living authentically, but knowing that inside things were off, right? And so there's a very nuanced distinction around these things. Even if you tend to be, a trailblazer and not of the mold and innovative, and you can still be wearing masks, right? Because that's how we're conditioned, that's how we're brought up, that's how our parents were brought up, and on and on and on and on. But the choice is always there to say, wait a minute, how's this working out for me? And that was my experience when I would say, gosh, it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, when I recognized, like, what is going on? I have done all the things that I said I wanted, right? The family, the husband, the house, the business, very accomplished career leading up to that, some really amazing achievements and opportunities. And I felt dead inside, completely numb. And I was like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And that was sort of the beginning of the pain of that, of just being like, how can I feel this way and be surrounded by all of these things that should make me happy? Like, clearly there's something wrong here. And it was really a catalyst for diving deeper into, how am I showing up? Am I really being true to myself? Am I expressing what I want and what I need? And like, the answers were like, no, 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 no. And because there were a lot of unhealed pieces that I thought I had addressed and healed. And maybe on a more surface layer I had. And it was just an invitation to look a little deeper and go a little deeper. And so, like, even when you're on this journey, sometimes that happens. You have that moment of like, okay, yeah, I've been diving deep, and something feels a little off, right? And so it's not that anything's wrong or bad. It's just simply like, okay, what is this situation? What's the lesson in this for me? What is it that I need to know about this? And to just get curious about it, because then that'll lead you to the next place. And I think that we're so, as humans, we're so quick to go straight to, there's something wrong and we need a solution. Right. It's like, well, what if nothing was wrong? What if it was just simply a signpost letting us know, hey, you're a little out of alignment here. You just need a tune-up or an adjustment, right? Versus, I'm wrong, you're wrong, this is wrong. It's more of a question of, it's less of a judgment, more a question of, where's your alignment at?
Right. Mm-hmm. So you covered a lot of good ground here. One phrase that you said that really stuck out for me, and I just want to highlight it here. you talked about, well, I'm going to rephrase it in my own words because I don't remember exactly how you said it, but I really liked it. It sounded like I'm wearing my authenticity mask today. I look really authentic. People can, they have the story. I can walk around, I can puff my chest out, and I can say, look at me, I am so authentic. Well, I love that. The fact that you had the awareness to know that you were pretending to be authentic that's amazing. That to me is like when you go from the spiritual ego to the next level and you start to transcend that spiritual ego and you realize, oh wait, no, that was bullshit. Let's get real here. Let's get real here. If I'm truly going to be authentic, what do I have to do? Well, first, let's get rid of that mask. I don't need to tell people I'm authentic. That's the first thing. They'll see it for themselves. I just simply have to be me. That's all I have to do. So to me, that's the kind of attitude shift that takes place. And when you get to that place, then you really don't care what people think about you. I mean, you might be interested in their opinion for whatever reason. You might be interested in their feedback, but it's not necessarily going to make you change anything, right?
It's not driving your behavior.
Correct. Yeah.
Anymore. You might still care. I mean, that's part of being a human too, right? Like, you start to care more about what feels right
Exactly.
for you.
About being true to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that ultimately, as I said right at the very beginning, that's the only thing that matters. Ultimately. And if every single person on this planet focused all his or her attention on being true to him or herself, can you imagine what this world would be like? I mean, things would transform instantly. It would be an amazing place.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that up. It's such an interesting concept because we're also really conditioned and trained to look outside of ourselves.
Exactly.
For answers and for change. And I think that there is a time and a place to start to bring that inner work out into the world. But really, I mean, my mind has been blown by the results of really getting honest with myself and getting clear about changes that I want to make and how I show up. And you start to not have to hold that, like, here are all the things outside of me that need to change. They just start to shift in response to the different way that you're being and showing up. Right. And it's not always easy. It's not that there's a lot of I hear a lot of talk about that, like, oh, you just change you change yourself and then everything changes and it's all butterflies and unicorns. Well, sometimes it's not. It's messy. It can get messy.
Yeah, sometimes it's just moths and horses.
Sometimes it's just moth and horses. Exactly. Yeah. So, and it's like, it sort of feels like how committed, when it gets a little funky, right? It's kind of like, well, how committed are you?
Mm-hmm.
How committed are you to being true to yourself? Because sometimes that requires like letting go of behaviors, letting go of people, letting go of certain situations. And that's the place that I think, people may sometimes get a sense of that before going into this kind of, self exploration and discovery and transformation. Because they have the sense that, like, if I change, like, a lot could change, like my whole life could change. And they're looking at it from that fear perspective when it's like, I could change and a whole lot could change for me, right? Like, it's a totally different vibration.
Right.
And it's okay that it's scary and it's also exciting because then you suddenly open up opportunities and possibilities that would not have been available to you while you were still carrying around and wearing all those masks.
Exactly. Well, here's another perspective that, you might like or not. I don't know. It's up to you. What if nothing has to change? I think part of our problem is that we imagine that something has to change, that there's something wrong with what is right now. And that, I think that is, as long as we hold that in our mind, we're making a judgment about what is. That's what's going on. If I can simply say, all right, here's what is, can I simply accept it? Can I accept it without judgment? Can I accept it as it is and just simply observe it? Now, let's take it a step further and say, can I accept me as I am and just observe me? Can I appreciate and just love everything that I am right now and forget about any need to change? The moment we do that, all of a sudden, it's like dropping all kinds of armor and, heavy weight and everything else. All of a sudden, you just don't have to do stuff anymore. There is no have to, all it is now is opportunity. Okay, I accept myself as I am right now. Well, what the hell is that? Who am I? What am I? All right, dig in, find out. And don't be afraid to look at the dark stuff, because that dark stuff that you've hidden away all your life might have some beautiful golden gems in them. So pay attention to that stuff that you have judged so harshly in the past and say, well, what is it about this? Why don't I kind of find a way to bring that back? Maybe I can use it for some positive purpose. And the other thing to remember is it doesn't matter what you do or how you show up. Someone out there is not going to like it. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Can you live with that? Can you be okay with the fact that Joe doesn't like the way I'm showing up? Can you be okay with my sister doesn't like the way I'm showing up now?
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. That's where it really starts. That's where the, as they say, the shit hits the fan. The rubber meets the road. Because if you're committed to being your true, authentic, full self, some of the people in your life will fall away. Some of them you will have had a lot of fun with. Some of them you will have had many, many wonderful experiences and adventures with. And even so, they will fall away because they don't like this new image that they're seeing. Mm-hmm. They liked it when you wore all those masks and you played all those games. So they're going to be in resistance, and you're going to have to be ready for that. And that's one of the challenges, I think. Many people falter, not so much because they are not committed to their own growth, but because they still want to keep those people in their lives, those people that they love so much. Well, I have had many, many people now fall away out of my life. And sometimes it was painful, especially when it was my own children. And I simply had to look at this and say, okay, am I committed to being my true self? Am I committed to honoring who I really am? And if so, am I willing to stand in that and just let them know I'm here anytime you want to reconnect with me? I love you no matter what you choose to do. I don't know, man. That's a tall order for most people.
It is, and it's a it's a difficult. It can be a difficult path to walk. I'm hearing a couple of different things that I want to key in on.
I noticed you were taking notes there.
I was taking notes. Yeah.
That's great.
So it's interesting. So I always notice when I start to hear things in a repeated way. So that's why I was taking notes, because you talked about change, and I was just doing another interview on another show, and there was this interesting reaction or response to the word change, and it was very similar to what you said. So I'm just sort of getting curious about that. And I appreciate what you said about what if there was nothing to change, and it's starting to formulate for me that like personally, I love change. Okay. And I know a lot of people don't like that. But I think that my perspective on it is like for me, change means growth. It means evolution. It means really becoming more of yourself, right? Remembering who we are, shedding the masks, right? But it's interesting to have these conversations and to I think what's coming up for me is that change can sometimes we can relate to that as there's something wrong, kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning of the interview here, like that we're doing something wrong or that there's something wrong with us or somehow we're inherently flawed. And um, that's not a great place to be motivated from.
Right.
So I get and appreciate what you're saying. And for me, it's like change is about moving more towards what we desire, moving more towards what feels true for us. And you're absolutely right. When we start to do that, things do change around us. And it looks like sometimes it looks like big changes. Sometimes it looks like everything's the same, but because we're more rooted in who we are, the way we respond to those outer things is different.
So
Uh,
let me ask you a question.
yeah.
If you just, look at who you are today and compare that with your memory of who you imagine you were, I think you said 6 years ago. Aren't you the same person?
That's a great question. Yeah, I would say same person and more opened up and more expressed to the person that was always there,
Exactly.
right?
So this is something that I think is really, 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 really important. That is, the idea of growth and evolution and expansion of consciousness and all that, these are very, very dear to my heart. And I love the fact that I'm going through this process right now that is, it's just really exciting. At the same time, I love where I am. I love where I am right now. And the idea of change as something that I need to do, I think, is an error in judgment or an error in thinking. There is nothing that any of us needs to do, really. There are opportunities. There are plenty of choices we can make in any given moment. And the choice that we make is going to be a little mini expression of who we are right now. Any choice I make in this moment is an expression of who I am right now. It might be different than the choice I made 10 years ago. In fact, it probably is. But there are also some choices that I continue to make that I made 10 years ago. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my point is, every single instant brings a new opportunity to make a choice. And if we are aware, then we can make that choice knowing more about who we are now than maybe we did 10 years ago. That's the key point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
And so the invitation is to be all of yourself. That's really what we're after here, is to have you be, experience, express, and just out there, full you, whatever that is, that you. That's the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really hearing the like really thinking of ourselves or experiencing ourselves as multidimensional,
Yeah.
right? What you said about I do some things from 10 years ago. Like there's a lot of the previous versions of myself that I've brought along right? So this
Sure.
isn't about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like
Right. Right.
bring those things that still feel alive and true with you, and future self calling you forward, right? It's okay to tap into that as well. Not
Mhm.
necessarily from a, like you said, like from a place where you're grounded and accepting and, hey, I like who I am. I accept who I am today. I accept. Okay, so this is bringing this is bringing up another piece about past versions, right? Because we can, when we start to do, well, I can only speak for myself. Um, One thing I noticed in when I started to do more shadow work and deeper inner work, um, is the shame and the judgment that came up along with that. And so I think when you start to go into that work and you start to go into the deeper layers and you start to learn to have compassion even for those pieces of yourself, and like you said, bring those along too, right? Because you're right, there's absolutely gems there. The shadow is just blocking the hidden light, right? But you got to get underneath to find it. And so even sort of bringing those aspects, those shadowy aspects along as well, but now balanced with the healthier um version of yourself, right? So it really speaks to accepting all of who you are, like you said, and really showing up as all of who you are in any given moment. And that's really what we're talking about here, of being full of your true self, your true self, and all parts, like make friends with all of yourself.
That's
And
right.
that opens up like so many opportunities, like you said.
Right. Well, and I love that we're touching on shadow a little bit here too. I know that the concept of shadow can be scary for some people, um, and that's not helped by the fact that we pretend in our entertainment industry and various other places that evil things come out of the shadows, you know. And in fact, we just went through a very short little ritualistic time in the last couple of days just about that very subject. And the truth is, darkness does not always hide evil. I mean, it can hide anything, really. But what's hidden in the darkness is not all evil. And as you said, you may be hiding some really amazing, beautiful qualities of yourself. In your attempt to hide this one thing over here, you're also hiding all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there's unfortunately there's no way to avoid that because they're all kind of connected. And really, that one thing that you're trying to hide, how bad is it? Come on, let's be honest. All right, so you talked a lot. Big deal. Is that any reason to stop talking altogether?
Yeah, right.
Or in my case, I was too full of myself. So I tried not to be full of myself. I tried to be full of something else, you know? And the something else turned out to be not so good, you know? And the not so good part was I pretended to be a whole bunch of other things along the way in order to accommodate and I guess to please other people.
Hmm.
I didn't do a great job of pleasing them so much, but I did try to accommodate them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because somehow I still pissed people off, even though I was trying to be something else to please them. It was funny how that worked out. Um, and I think all of that led me to this place eventually in 2003 where I had to make a choice. And the choice was to throw all that crap away, all the bullshit, and really just stand in the truth of who I was. And in that moment, I said, this is it. I am not going back to that way of being.
Mm.
I might, as you said, I might pull some of those little pieces and bring them back with me, but this is where I want to be. I want to be connected to this aspect of me. And so far, I mean, haven't done a perfect job. I still slip back into those old ways from time to time. Who doesn't? But I do it less and less each day. And more of the authentic me is showing up. So it's a practice. It's an ongoing journey, as you said. It's not going to be perfect. It's not always going to be pretty. And that's okay. Oh, actually, it is perfect and it is pretty. It just may not be that way to your ego mind.
Right. You might not feel that. Right. And that's okay. And that's okay too. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
You're allowed to feel what you feel about it.
That's right.
And I want to go back to this bit about evil and darkness and, the programming that we have around everything that's dark is evil. Not true. Life is formed in darkness, right? We spend 9 months, 10 months. We're talking about my kids in the womb.
You were pregnant for 10 months?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, right. Like creation happens in darkness, right? We plant seeds in the dark soil and they grow.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. It's not to say, like, well, we could have a whole other conversation and a whole another show on evil and darkness and all of that. I'm not saying
and maybe we will.
Hey, maybe we will. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. What I'm saying is we think that's the only thing that exists
in the darkness.
In the dark. And it's not, It's not true. There's beautiful, creative, fertile material in that darkness.
That's right. Well, we could go for hours, I'm sure, talking about this.
Yeah, I think
it's such a great conversation, and there's so much rich material here to share with people. But we're getting close to our time, and I want to give you a chance to say some closing words to, well, we don't have too many people in the live audience, but anybody who's watching the recording. So just whatever you'd like to say.
Yeah, I think I would really like to invite those who are tuning in to just reflect on any of the pieces that of this conversation that stood out to you, potentially triggered you, resonated with you, and just kind of journal about it and journal about what you might do differently, more or maybe something that's sparked some sort of inspiration for you as a result of this conversation. I really have been feeling called to invite people to just get more curious and to slow down and really like absorb and digest, because we live in such a high, fast-paced society. There's lots of information out there. It's very easy to kind of bounce from one thing or another, but really sit with this and digest it and take the pieces that speak to you, to help you start to create new possibilities for yourself.
Well, thank you so much for that, Gayle. And those are great words of wisdom. I really encourage people to do journaling as well. Can you please just put your link in the chat there?
Absolutely.
So we can get people to come and visit your website or whatever?
Yeah.
And also, I believe you have a gift that you wanted to offer. Is that right?
Okay. One thing at a time, David. I'm not typing very fast. Yeah. So if you want to connect with me, I have all kinds of free resources and offerings over at my website at GayleNowak.com. And my gift, I have to admit, I forgot about this, but I actually have 2 free resources. Let's see, let me just kind of tune into what feels right. I have a Talk to Your Heart assessment, and this is actually a great assessment to help you tune into different areas of your life and start to get honest with yourself about how you're feeling with those different areas. There's some deeper thought-provoking questions in there to help you kind of identify if you are being full of yourself, if you are showing up as your true self. So that kind of feels like the most appropriate.
Yeah, I like that. So the speak to your heart assessment, is that what you
Talk to
called
your
it?
heart assessment.
Talk to your heart assessment. Beautiful.
Let me see if I can pull that up.
Sure.
The link.
Well, I'll add that onto the website for the permanent page for this show anyway, and because I assume that's there indefinitely. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Right. Yep. And I just pasted that in there in the chat.
Beautiful.
Too.
Got it. Okay. Well, so thank you so much, Gayle, for being here. It's been just a real joy, as always, having a conversation with you. I think we covered a lot of great ground today.
We did.
Yeah. And I want to thank you all for watching today's program, and to remind you that you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode of my show on my website at lifemasterytv.com, life-mastery-tv.com. Remember, it's time to release the old story associated with allowing your joyful and exuberant nature to reveal itself. Join us and be part of this movement to be totally full of yourself, your real self, your true self, your authentic self. That's what this is really all about, okay? And friends, I invite you to remember to practice the Life Mastery mantra each day. It goes like this: I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. See you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.
Bye.